is from Angela. Angela, thank you for submitting your question. So she says, I fear sharing my story when it comes to what I do in my business because there are other people involved in it, such as family members. Any advice? I think for most of us, our family members are included somewhere in our healing story and our healing journey. I know for me, my family members are very interwoven into my whole life, my whole journey. You guys, I'm sure if you're watching this, you've heard my story before, so I'm not going to repeat that, but there's been major influences of my family in good and bad, heartbreaking and loving, on all ends of the spectrum and everything in between. And so I guess what I'm saying is I relate to you, Angela, and this is something that you get to decide how you want to navigate and what you feel comfortable sharing. I'll give at least a couple examples here. The first is when I wrote my book, 21 Days of Healing. And I had the same thought go through my mind, like, how am I supposed to talk about my family members? Like, they might read this. What if I don't have what if everything I have to say isn't nice? And I did filter myself a little bit. I read through, I remember reading through a chapter where my grandmother was mentioned and she's no longer living. But even then I was like, did I paint her in a good light? Should I change this? Should I edit this to be more pleasing to the reader? Even if they're not alive. What if one of her children reads it? And, what I want to share is that I do wish that I had just been more authentically expressed in that process. And I joke with my book coach right now. I'm like, well, if I had just laid it all out on the line in that first book, maybe there wouldn't need to be a second book. But now I feel very deeply that there needs to be a second book because there's more to share. So I don't know what you might take from that, but for me, it's just this reminder that if you don't share it fully the first time, that likely if it's meant to be shared, it's gonna circle back around and you're gonna be called to share it again, or maybe again and again and again and again, until eventually, you've shared your truth. And the other thing to think about is simply that your reality is your reality. No one can question that. It's your truth, it's your reality, it's your perspective on any of these maybe family situations that have impacted your healing, it sounds like. They're gonna have a different perspective. They just are. Even if it's super similar, it's still through their eyes. It's never going to be the same perspective as yours, and that doesn't mean that you are wrong. It doesn't mean your side of the story is wrong. It just means that the way I remember that and the way that you remember that are different, and it's okay. That helped me realize that even if my mom or my dad or my siblings or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle or a cousin read my story and were like, I don't remember it that way, or they questioned me in some regard, that didn't mean I was wrong. Because that was where part of my fear was coming from. It was like, well, if I share my version of the story, what if they say that I'm making it up? When I know I'm not making it up. And I just had to continuously remember, because you guys know I share a lot of myself online, a lot. And I just have to remember that this is my perspective. And I happen to have a very public platform in which I share a lot of that. But my family may not agree with everything I say and my version of these stories, that the way that I experience them. But that's my truth. That's how I feel. your emotions are never going to be wrong. Your emotions are never going to be wrong. The last thing I think I want to add here is that it's okay to not share all angles of every single story. So there are other stories that I've shared that I haven't wanted to, maybe I haven't been ready to, maybe I never will be ready to, or just won't ever want to share the full story, full detail, how I really feel about this person and how I'm really still angry about that thing or whatever it is. Like, not everything does have to be shared online. So you also get to use discernment on how much you want to share versus what you feel like you should share or you need to share. How much do you actually want to share about that situation? It's okay, I think, in maybe not all the time. We don't want to fall into like a people pleaser, good girl archetype all the time. But I do think it's okay to be cognizant of other people's feelings, to be aware of how that might affect somebody and to take that into consideration. I don't think that that should hold you back from ever sharing your story out of fear, but I do think it's okay to consider other people's feelings. And maybe if you choose to share more of your story, you also just give your family members who are involved a heads up and just say, hey, I'm going to be sharing this part of my story. It mentions you. I want you to know, I want you to know that I still deeply love and respect you, but this is part of my healing journey where I feel like I just need to share. If that's not true, then don't say that. But however, you might maybe want to inform. And I guess the last option is really just like block your family members. You don't have to have them see what you're sharing. You could, or like you can do the manual settings where you just block them from seeing that post if you want to keep it more private for now. All right, so those are some considerations. I'm curious to see which ones, if any, resonate most with you, and if you might feel more inspired to share a little bit of your story, because also remember the impact of your story and how maybe you think about some of the people's stories that you've heard that have been really memorable, shifting, transforming, relatable for you in your life, and just what it felt like to hear that person's story. And just know that you can do that. You can be that for other people as well. That helps me as well sometimes, where I feel like today I published a podcast. This week's episode is Healing from Miscarriage, and I really open up inside that episode, and it was very easy to think about taking it down or not publishing it. I recorded it last week, but I remembered about the impact I want to have on this planet, the impact I want to have on my community. And that was also part of the motivation, the mission, and the driving force around continuing to share even when it's uncomfortable. All right, Angela, I hope this has been super helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions.